The slap landed with the crack of a breaking branch in winter silence. My head snapped sideways, my reading glasses flew off and shattered against the polished oak floor of the Willow Grove Country Club ballroom. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. 147 guests, friends of the bride's family, business associates, distant cousins, stood frozen like statues in a ruined garden. My daughter-in-law, Rebecca, towered over me in ivory satin and Swarovski crystals, her face flushed with triumph. "That's what happens when you're selfish, Evelyn," she spat, loud enough for the back tables to hear. "You think you can cling to that big empty house on Maple Lane forever? At your age? Daniel and I are starting a family. We need space, real space, not your crumbling museum of memories." My son Daniel stood 2 paces behind her, tuxedo immaculate, hands clasped behind his back. He did not step forward. He did not speak. He did not even lower his eyes in shame. He simply stared at the floor, as though the pattern in the parquet was suddenly the most fascinating thing in the world. I stayed down a moment longer than necessary, long enough to feel every pair of eyes pressing against my skin like hot coins. Then I rose slowly, one hand braced on the nearest chair, the other pressing my stinging cheek. A thin line of blood trickled from where my glasses had cut the bridge of my nose. No one moved to help me. Rebecca smoothed her veil with manicured nails. "You're not welcome at the rest of the reception. Leave quietly. We'll have someone pack up your things from the head table. And tomorrow, Daniel will bring the transfer papers. Sign them, or we'll do this the hard way." The string quartet resumed playing, something soft and lilting, as though nothing had happened. Conversations restarted in hushed fragments. I turned and walked toward the double doors, heels clicking like accusations on the marble. Behind me, I heard Rebecca laugh, a bright, victorious sound, and say to her maid of honor, "Finally, she's been holding that house hostage for years." I did not cry until I reached the coat room. "My name is Evelyn Whitaker. I am 72. I wear cardigans from the thrift shop on Elm Street, drive a 15-year-old Subaru with a dented fender, and buy day-old bread because it's practical." To Rebecca, and to most people who met me after my husband Paul died, I was the gentle, slightly confused widow living on a teacher's pension and Social Security. That was the story I let them believe. For 23 years, I had cultivated that image with deliberate care, the way a gardener prunes roses to hide the thorns. Paul had not been the high school history teacher everyone remembered. He had quietly built a regional chain of self-storage facilities in the 1980s and 90s, 32 locations across 3 states by the time cancer took him. We never flaunted the money. Visible wealth invites envy, lawsuits, and family vultures, Paul used to say. So we lived modestly, invested wisely, and kept the empire invisible. When he died, I continued the tradition. The storage business ran itself through a management company. I collected rent checks deposited into blind trusts. I worked 3 mornings a week at the public library's used book sale, not for money, but because I liked the smell of old pages and the company of people who still read. Rebecca had smelled opportunity the first time she stepped into the house on Maple Lane. "That foyer is huge," she'd said, eyes sweeping the 12-foot ceilings, the original oak paneling, the leaded glass windows. "You must feel lost here all alone." She smiled sweetly, but her gaze lingered on the square footage the way a jeweler studies uncut stones. Over the next 22 months, the campaign began in whispers. "You really don't need 5 bedrooms, Evelyn. At your age, stairs are dangerous. Daniel and I are thinking about children soon. A big yard would be perfect. We found a lovely condo community for active seniors, gated, maintenance-free. You'd have friends your own age." Each suggestion came wrapped in concern, tied with a ribbon of fake affection. Daniel parroted the lines like a man reading cue cards. The son I raised to open doors for strangers now opened his mouth only to echo his wife. I endured it because mothers endure. I told myself it was youth, ambition, temporary blindness. I even increased the quiet monthly transfers I'd been making to them for years, $3,900 disguised as dividends from Paul's old savings bonds. I thought I was buying time for Daniel to remember who he was. Then came the wedding planning. Rebecca began referring to the Maple Lane house as our future home, in front of caterers, florists, photographers. She brought an appraiser to the property without telling me, caught only because the neighbor across the street, old Mr. Callahan, called to ask why strangers were measuring my windows. She started leaving brochures for memory care facilities on my kitchen table, just in case. 3 nights before the wedding, she came alone. "Evelyn," she said, sitting across from me at the breakfast nook, "let's be adults. Sign the quitclaim deed now. Make it a wedding gift. Daniel deserves stability. You deserve peace of mind. If you refuse again, we'll have no choice but to pursue guardianship. The court will see you're not making rational decisions anymore." I refused, so she slapped me in front of God and everyone on her wedding day. I sat in my car in the country club parking lot for 43 minutes. The night was cool, the windows fogged with my breathing. I dialed a number I hadn't used in public in almost a decade. "Martin," I said when my attorney answered. "It's Evelyn. I need you at the Willow Grove ballroom. Bring the full packet, trust amendments, lien notices, payment revocations, everything. And call the venue manager. Tell him the private guarantor is withdrawing support." Martin paused only a second. "You're certain?" "I'm more certain of anything." 37 minutes later, Martin arrived in his black Audi, briefcase in hand, flanked by 2 paralegals carrying document boxes. We entered through the service corridor. No drama, no announcement. The reception was in full swing. Laughter, clinking glasses, a slow waltz. Martin stepped to the bandstand and tapped the microphone. The music died. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said in the calm voice.
And a measured voice that had closed million-dollar deals and dismantled crooked trusts. "I apologize for the interruption. I represent Evelyn Whitaker in her capacity as settler and sole trustee of the Whitaker Family Irrevocable Trust, as well as majority owner of Pinnacle Self-Storage Group." A ripple of confusion swept the room. Rebecca, laughing at the sweetheart table, froze mid-sentence. Daniel set his champagne flute down so hard it cracked. Martin continued without pause. "Effective immediately, all supplemental payments previously made to Daniel Whitaker and Rebecca Langston, totaling $3,900 monthly for the past 26 months, have been terminated. These transfers, disguised as investment income, covered mortgage shortfalls, vehicle leases, credit card minimums, and a significant portion of tonight's reception expenses. The personal guarantee provided by Mrs. Whitaker for the lease of the couple's $3,800 per month loft has been revoked. The landlord will receive formal notice at 8 a.m. tomorrow. The $94,700 balance for tonight's reception, catering by La Belle Époque, open bar, floral installations by Fleur du Jour, string quartet, photography, and venue rental, previously secured by Mrs. Whitaker as a private gift, is now due in full. Payment must be arranged before guests depart, or the venue will exercise its contractual right to suspend services and pursue collection. Rebecca stood so quickly her chair toppled. "This is absurd. Evelyn doesn't have that kind of money. Look at her. She shops at Goodwill." Martin opened the first folder. "For the record, Pinnacle Self-Storage operates 32 facilities across Illinois, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Annual net revenue last fiscal year, $11.4 million. Mrs. Whitaker holds 78% ownership. The trust corpus, excluding real property, currently stands at $14.7 million in diversified holdings." He laid a single sheet on the nearest table, a recent balance statement stamped by a major Chicago bank. Silence swallowed the room. Daniel's voice cracked like dry wood. "Mom, you've been paying for everything?" "For 26 months, I said, stepping forward at last. My voice was steady, though my hands trembled behind my back. "I thought I was helping my son through a rough patch. I thought I was buying him time to become the man his father and I raised. Instead, I financed a campaign to strip me of the only home Paul and I ever owned together. Rebecca laughed, a high, brittle sound. "You're lying. This is some sick joke. You're senile. The house on Maple Lane was purchased in 1987 with Paul's first big storage facility profit. It is titled in an irrevocable trust that names no individual beneficiary until certain conditions are met, conditions that now exclude Daniel and Rebecca entirely. The property has been appraised at $2.1 million. It will never be yours." Guests began pulling out phones. Several were already recording. Martin raised his voice slightly. "Furthermore, Mrs. Whitaker has exercised her reserved power to amend the trust. Daniel's previously designated 55% remainder interest has been redirected, 40% to the Paul Whitaker Foundation for Elder Financial Protection, 40% to scholarships for first-generation college students in Paul's name, and 20% to a discretionary fund for any future grandchildren, administered independently and inaccessible until they reach age 30 or demonstrate 5 consecutive years of independent financial stability." Rebecca staggered backward. "You can't do that. We're family." "Family," I repeated softly, "does not slap its elders in public. Family does not conspire to declare its elders incompetent. Family does not appraise someone's home behind their back and call it concern." Daniel finally moved, 3 steps toward me, hands outstretched. "Mom, please, there are people here. The wedding, the photos. We can fix this. We didn't know." "You knew enough to hire a lawyer specializing in guardianship last February. You knew enough to request a preliminary mental capacity evaluation in April. You knew enough to let tonight's assault occur without intervention." The venue manager appeared at the edge of the crowd, flanked by 2 security officers. "Mrs. Whitaker, we've received confirmation of the payment revocation. I'm afraid we must ask for immediate resolution of the outstanding balance or begin escorting guests out." Chaos bloomed. Rebecca collapsed into a chair, veil askew, sobbing theatrically. "Everything's ruined. Everything we planned." Daniel looked at me with the eyes of a stranger, shock, betrayal, dawning comprehension. "You've been lying to us for years." "No," I said. "I've been protecting myself from people who would turn love into leverage." I turned to the room. "To everyone here tonight who witnessed what happened earlier and did nothing, remember this moment. One day it may be your mother, your grandmother, your neighbor. Silence is complicity." Then I walked out, Martin and the paralegals flanking me like quiet sentinels. Behind us, the ballroom dissolved into argument, tears, and the sound of credit cards being declined at the bar. 3 days later, the viral videos hit 7 figures. Bride slaps mother-in-law, then learns the shocking truth, became clickbait gold. Rebecca's interior design Instagram account lost 80,000 followers overnight. Sponsors dropped her like hot coals. Daniel's fintech startup, partially funded by my quiet seed money, saw its lead investor pull out. They were evicted from the loft within the week. They tried once, showed up at Maple Lane on a rainy Thursday, Daniel unshaven, Rebecca red-eyed. "We're sorry," Daniel said through the screen door. "We didn't understand." Rebecca added, voice small, "I'm pregnant. We need help." I stood on the other side of the glass, feeling nothing but calm. You'll figure it out the way everyone else does, without using someone else's life as collateral. I closed the door gently. 6 months later, the guardianship petition they filed was dismissed with prejudice. The judge called it frivolous and retaliatory and ordered them to pay my legal fees, $38,000. They declared bankruptcy 2 months after that. I sold the big house, not because I needed the money, but because every room echoed with memories I no longer wanted poisoned. I bought a modest bungalow near the river, planted a garden, and started the Paul Whitaker Foundation in earnest. We've helped 214 seniors so far, documenting coercion, freezing suspicious transfers, teaching people how to spot the slow bleed of emotional blackmail disguised as love. Daniel calls twice a year, birthdays, Christmas. always asking, never apologizing. I listen politely, then hang up. His daughter, Lily, was born 14 months ago. I send a check to a trust every quarter. She'll never know hunger or want for education, but she'll also never know a grandmother who can be bought. Sometimes, late at night, I sit on my new porch with a cup of chamomile and think about the slap. Not with anger anymore, just clarity. That single blow broke the last chain I'd willingly worn. I no longer hide who I am. I no longer apologize for having means. And I no longer mistake endurance for love. The house on Maple Lane sold to a young family last spring. They're raising 2 boys there now. I drive past sometimes, slow enough to see the new swing set in the backyard, the flower boxes under the windows. I smile, then keep driving. Some houses hold memories, others hold lessons. I've learned mine.